I stared at my phone, reading the message from my mother again. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. Haha. My hands shook as I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. Just last week, we were having Sunday dinner together, laughing about old family stories. Now this text felt like a knife to my heart. What could have possibly happened? 2 days later, as I was sleeping on my friend's couch, an email notification appeared. Urgent. From Stevens and Holloway Law Firm. I never expected my life to fall apart so quickly. At 28, I thought I was finally getting everything together. After graduating from State University with a computer science degree, I decided to return to my hometown of Westbrook to be closer to my parents, Frank and Diane. They were getting older, and I wanted to spend more time with them while building my own life. I found a decent one-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from their suburban home, which gave me independence while allowing for regular family dinners and weekend visits. For the past 3 years, I'd been working for a software company, steadily building my skills and reputation. 6 months ago, I took the biggest risk of my life and launched my own business developing customized software solutions for local businesses. The concept was simple but effective. Create affordable, tailored systems that small businesses couldn't get from big tech companies. I called it Local Logic Solutions, and despite the initial uncertainty, I was beginning to gain traction with several clients. My parents had always seemed supportive of my ambitions. Dad especially had encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit since I was a kid selling lemonade on our street corner. "Quentin," he'd say, "you've got the mind of a businessman. Just make sure you use it to help people, not just to make money." Those words shaped my entire approach to business. The first hint that something was wrong came 3 weeks ago during our usual Sunday dinner. My younger sister Amanda announced her engagement to Jackson, a finance manager she'd met only 6 months earlier. I was surprised by the speed of their relationship but tried to be happy for her. Jackson seemed charming enough, though something about his perfect smile never quite reached his eyes. "We've set a date for June," Amanda declared, flashing her enormous diamond ring. "Mom and Dad are giving us $30,000 for the wedding. Isn't that amazing?" I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. Just 2 months earlier, I had approached my parents about possibly investing $10,000 in my business launch. They had apologetically explained that their retirement savings were tight and they couldn't risk the money. I understood completely and found alternative funding, but hearing about this generous wedding gift caught me off guard. "That's really generous," I said carefully, glancing at my parents. Mom became intensely focused on cutting her pot roast, while Dad suddenly needed to refill his water glass. "Well, a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event," Mom said defensively. "And Amanda has always dreamed of a big celebration." I nodded and changed the subject. But later, as I was helping Dad with the dishes, I gently asked about the discrepancy. "Dad, I'm really happy for Amanda, but I'm a bit confused. When I asked about the business loan, you said finances were tight." He avoided my eyes, scrubbing a perfectly clean plate. "Your mother handles the finances, Quentin. You know that." "I'm not upset," I clarified. "I'm doing fine. I just want to make sure you two are okay financially. 30,000 is a lot of money. We have our priorities straight," he snapped, so unlike his usual mild manner that I took a step back. "Amanda is starting a family. Your business is just, well, businesses fail all the time." The conversation ended there, with an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. I left earlier than usual that night, puzzled by the interaction but willing to let it go. People get weird about money, and parents aren't always fair. That's just life. A week later, I received an unexpected call from Dad asking me to come over for lunch on Tuesday. When I arrived, both my parents seemed overly cheerful, as if our awkward exchange had never happened. "Quentin, your mother and I have been talking," Dad said after serving me a sandwich. "We think we were too hasty in turning down your business proposal. In fact, we'd like to do more than just give you a loan. I want to become a silent partner in your company." "What?" I was genuinely shocked. "Dad, that's not necessary. I'm already up and running." "I insist," he said firmly. $50,000. We believe in you, son. Mom nodded enthusiastically. We're so proud of what you're building. Something felt off about their sudden change of heart, but I couldn't pin down what. When Dad showed me the cashier's check already made out to my business account, I felt a surge of gratitude mixed with confusion. We spent the afternoon drafting and signing a basic partnership agreement. Dad would own 20% of the company in exchange for his investment, though he insisted he wanted no role in day-to-day operations. "This is your vision," he said, patting my shoulder. "I'm just providing some capital to help it grow." 3 days later, I received the text message that would turn my world upside down. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." Haha. At first, I thought Mom's phone had been hacked or stolen. It was so completely out of character that it couldn't possibly be real. I tried calling immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's phone with the same result. Increasingly worried, I drove straight to their house. My key didn't work in the front door. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, then knocked loudly. Through the living room window, I could see lights on and hear the faint sound of the television. Both their cars were in the driveway. "Mom? Dad? It's Quentin. Is everything okay?" I called out, walking around to the back door. That key didn't work either. As I returned to the front, I saw the curtain in the living room move slightly, as if someone had been looking out. But no one came to the door. Thoroughly confused and increasingly concerned, I returned home to find another shock waiting for me. When I logged into my business banking account, the $50,000 that had been deposited 3 days earlier had been withdrawn that morning. The account was nearly empty except for a few $100s I had in there before the investment. I called the bank immediately, only to learn that the withdrawal had been authorized using the proper credentials and security questions. As a partner in the business, Dad had the right to withdraw the funds. That night, I couldn't sleep. None of it made sense. What could have possibly happened in the 3 days between our friendly partnership agreement and this bizarre rejection? And why the cruel, taunting message from my mother's phone? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would test every relationship I had and force me to fight for not just my business, but my very identity. The morning after discovering the locks had been changed, I was determined to get answers. I started calling family members and close friends, hoping someone could shed light on my parents' inexplicable behavior. My first call was to Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, who had always been kind to me. "Quentin," she answered coldly. "I don't think we should be talking right now. Aunt Linda, please. I don't understand what's happening. Mom sent me this horrible text, and Dad withdrew all the money from my business account. I can't reach them." "I think you know exactly what you did," she replied, her voice uncharacteristically hard. "Your mother is devastated. I have to support my sister right now." She hung up before I could respond. Next, I tried Uncle Patrick, Dad's brother, and my godfather. We'd always been close, and he had been a mentor to me growing up. "Uncle Patrick, something crazy is happening with Mom and Dad. They've locked me out of their house, withdrawn money from my business, and won't talk to me. Do you know what's going on?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Maybe you should think about what you did, Quentin." "What I did? What are you talking about?" Another uncomfortable pause. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but Amanda and your parents have been telling everyone that you threatened them when they wouldn't give you more money." The accusation was so absurd that I actually laughed. "That's completely untrue. Dad just invested in my business 3 days ago. Everything was fine. They said you came back demanding more and became violent when they refused," Patrick continued reluctantly. "Your mother was terrified enough to change the locks. Uncle Patrick, you've known me my entire life. Have you ever seen me violent? Ever?" He sighed heavily. "No, which is why this is all very confusing. Look, give them some space. Let things cool down." By midday, I was desperate enough to drive back to my parents' house. As I pulled up, I saw them through the front window. Dad was reading a newspaper in his armchair while Mom watered her houseplants. It was such a normal, peaceful, domestic scene that for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. I knocked on the door. They both looked up, clearly saw me, Then Dad immediately drew the curtains while Mom hurried out of the room. I stood there knocking for 20 minutes, but they never answered. As I was about to leave, a police cruiser slowly drove past the house, the officer inside eyeing me carefully. The message was clear. I was being watched. Someone had called the police about me. Back at my apartment, I found several messages on my phone from family, friends, and distant relatives. All variations on the same theme. Heard about what happened. Hope you get the help you need. One childhood friend directly asked, "Is it true you have anger issues now? Your mom told my mom you've been scaring them lately." The accusations were mounting, creating a reality I didn't recognize. According to the stories circulating, I was suddenly an unstable, violent person who had threatened my parents for money. Nothing could be further from the truth. That afternoon, I met with Taylor, my business partner and college friend who owned 15% of Local Logic Solutions. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop rather than our small office space. "This is insane, Quentin," Taylor said after I explained the situation. "I've seen you stressed over deadlines, and you barely even raise your voice." "I know. And now my business account is empty, which means I can't pay our contractors or the office rent." Taylor's expression grew more troubled. "That's not the only problem. Have you checked your work email today?" I hadn't, with everything else going on. When I opened it on my laptop, my stomach dropped. The inbox was flooded with messages from clients, most with subject lines like cancellation of services or urgent concerns. I opened one from Gerald Mason, the owner of a local hardware store chain who had been one of our first clients. "Quentin, I'm deeply concerned about what I've been hearing regarding your business practices and personal conduct. A family member of yours reached out to express worry about their investment and shared some troubling information about the company's finances. While I've been satisfied with your services, I can't risk association with potential fraud. Please consider this formal notice of our contract termination." "What the hell?" I whispered, opening message after message. Most were similar, citing concerns about fraud or my personal conduct. But the most devastating was from Westbrook Medical Group, our largest client. "Mr. Lawson, we're terminating our contract immediately due to breach of terms. The attached email from you promising services well beyond our agreement constitutes misrepresentation. Our legal team will be in touch regarding recovery of our initial payment." I opened the attachment to find an email supposedly from my account, dated 2 days ago, promising the medical group sophisticated AI diagnostic tools that were nowhere in our original contract and far beyond our current capabilities. "I never sent this," I said, showing Taylor. "This is completely fabricated." "Can you prove that?" Taylor asked grimly. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. "Urgent. From Stevens and Holloway Law Firm." The message was brief but devastating. "Mr. Lawson, we represent Frank and Diane Lawson in a matter concerning alleged fraud and coercion. Our clients are filing for an emergency protection order against you and initiating civil proceedings to recover funds they allege were obtained through deceptive practices. Please have your legal representation contact our office immediately to discuss this matter." I felt the floor drop out from under me. My own parents were suing me and seeking a restraining order. The world had gone completely mad. "Taylor," I said, my voice barely steady, "I'm being set up. Someone is systematically destroying my life, and I think it has something to do with Amanda and her fiancé." "That's a serious accusation," Taylor replied cautiously. "But I've known you since freshman year, and you're the most straight arrow person I know. Whatever's happening, I've got your back." Little did I know how much I would need that support in the days ahead, as the campaign against me escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The week following the lawyer's email marked the complete unraveling of my life. The $50,000 my father had withdrawn from the business account had left me unable to pay my outstanding obligations. With no way to fulfill our contracts, I had to inform the few remaining clients that Local Logic Solutions was temporarily suspending operations. Taylor agreed to handle the client communications while I tried to sort out the legal mess. "Just focus on clearing your name," she said. "The business can be rebuilt once this is resolved." But resolution seemed increasingly distant as new problems arose daily. When I returned to my apartment after meeting with Taylor, I found a formal eviction notice taped to my door, citing criminal activity as the cause. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, had always been reasonable before. When I called to discuss the notice, he was apologetic but firm. I received an anonymous email claiming you're involved in fraud and money laundering, with evidence that authorities are investigating you. The lease has a morality clause. I'm sorry, but I need you out by the end of the week. Mr. Peterson, this is all part of a misunderstanding. There's no investigation. Someone is trying to ruin me. Then clear it up with the authorities and bring me proof, he said. Until then, my decision stands. I've got other tenants to think about. With nowhere else to go, I called my college roommate Drew, who now worked as an engineer in the same city. Despite having heard rumors about my situation, Drew didn't hesitate to offer his spare room. Whatever's happening, you're not a violent person, he said. Stay as long as you need to sort this out. Moving into Drew's apartment was humbling. 3 weeks ago, I had been a successful business owner with a growing client list, my own apartment, and a supportive family. Now I was essentially homeless, my business was in ruins, and my own parents were suing me for fraud. The weight of it all crashed down on me that first night on Drew's pull-out sofa. For hours I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the chaos. The methodical destruction of my life seemed too coordinated to be coincidental. Someone was deliberately targeting every aspect of my existence, from family to business to home. My thoughts kept returning to the strange timing. Everything had been fine until Amanda announced her engagement to Jackson. The sudden reversal in my parents' attitude toward my business happened right after that announcement, and the withdrawal of funds occurred just days after the partnership was established. The next morning, I began calling lawyers, only to discover another problem. My credit cards were being declined. When I checked my personal bank account, I found it nearly empty, with several large transfers to companies I'd never heard of. I walked to the nearest branch of my bank, hoping to speak to someone in person about the unauthorized transactions. The bank manager, a woman named Rachel, listened to my story with growing concern. Mr. Lawson, these transactions have all the hallmarks of identity theft. The withdrawals were made using your account information and password, but from IP addresses across the country. I'll flag this as fraud immediately and start the investigation process. How long will that take? I asked, desperately. Honestly, weeks to months. We'll freeze your accounts to prevent further theft, but recovering the money depends on how sophisticated the thieves are. With my accounts frozen and business income halted, I had less than $300 in cash to my name. Drew offered to cover my immediate expenses, but I couldn't rely on his generosity indefinitely. In desperation, I pawned my laptop, watch, and the few electronics I had managed to bring to Drew's apartment. The $800 I received would buy me a little time, enough to hire a lawyer for an initial consultation. After calling several firms, I found Jessica Winters, a younger attorney who specialized in identity theft and fraud cases. She agreed to meet with me the following day for a reduced consultation fee. Jessica's office was modest but professional. She listened intently as I detailed the events of the past 2 weeks, taking careful notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the time I finished, her expression had shifted from professional interest to genuine concern. Mr. Lawson, what you're describing isn't random identity theft or a family disagreement that got out of hand. This appears to be a coordinated campaign to isolate you socially, destroy you financially, and potentially frame you for crimes you didn't commit. But why? I asked. What could anyone possibly gain from ruining my life? That's what we need to figure out, she replied. I'd like to run a comprehensive background check on everyone involved, particularly your sister's fiancé. The timing of his appearance in these events seems suspicious. I agreed, using most of my remaining funds to retain Jessica's services. As I left her office, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. At least someone believed me and was willing to help. That hope was short-lived. When I returned to Drew's apartment, he met me at the door with a troubled expression. "Quentin, while you were out," Jessica called. She said it was urgent and couldn't wait. I immediately called her back. "Quentin, I've found something concerning," she said without preamble. "Someone has been using your identity to apply for high-interest loans. There are applications for over $100,000 in your name, all initiated in the past 10 days. What? I never applied for any loans. I know. The applications were submitted from an IP address linked to your parents' home, but the typing patterns and language don't match samples of your writing I've analyzed. Whoever did this knows enough about you to pass basic identity verification, but wasn't careful about mimicking your communication style. Can we use that as evidence? It helps, but there's more. Several large purchases were made with these fraudulent loans. Electronics, furniture, even a car, all shipped to an address I don't recognize. She read me the address, which meant nothing to me. I've never heard of that place. It's a rental property, Jessica explained. And here's where things get interesting. I ran a background check on Jackson Turner, your sister's fiancé. He has a surprisingly thin history, almost as if his identity was recently created. But I did find that 2 years ago, a man matching his description was investigated in Virginia for a family financial scheme very similar to what you're experiencing. Was he convicted? No. The family suddenly refused to cooperate with investigators, and the charges were dropped. But the pattern is remarkably similar. Ingratiation with a family, isolation of a specific member, then systematic financial exploitation. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Could Jackson be deliberately targeting my family? And if so, what was Amanda's role? Was my sister a victim or an accomplice? What do we do now? I asked, my mind reeling. We gather more evidence, Jessica said firmly. I've already filed fraud alerts with the credit bureaus to prevent more loans in your name. Tomorrow, we'll start building your defense and figuring out exactly what Jackson's game is. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. My life had been systematically dismantled in less than 2 weeks, leaving me with nothing but questions and suspicions. Yet somehow, the revelation that this might be a calculated scheme rather than a random series of disasters gave me something to fight against. If someone was orchestrating my downfall, there had to be a reason and evidence to prove my innocence. That night, for the first time since receiving my mother's text, I slept soundly. The battle ahead would be difficult, but at least now I knew I was fighting more than just bad luck or misunderstanding. Someone had declared war on my life, and I was finally ready to defend myself. A week after hiring Jessica, I was helping Drew organize his garage as a small way to repay his hospitality. As we sorted through boxes of college memorabilia and forgotten projects, I came across a dusty external hard drive I didn't recognize. "Is this yours?" I asked, holding it up. Drew squinted at it. "No, looks like something you might have left here years ago. You used to back up your projects on my computer sometimes, remember?" A memory clicked into place. During college breaks, I'd occasionally stayed with Drew's family since they lived closer to campus than my parents. I had used his desktop to back up photos and projects. "Mind if I check what's on it?" I asked. "Go ahead. My laptop's on the kitchen table." I connected the hard drive, not expecting much. To my surprise, it contained a treasure trove of forgotten files, old business proposals, family photos, even early prototypes of what would eventually become local logic solutions. As I scrolled through the photos, I found a folder labeled Amanda's engagement party from just 2 months ago. I hadn't taken many pictures that night, focused instead on being supportive despite my reservations about the speed of their relationship. The first few images showed standard party scenes. Amanda beaming beside Jackson, my parents proudly hosting, relatives mingling with champagne glasses. But then I noticed something odd in the background of one photo. While most guests were gathered around Amanda showing off her ring, my father was in the corner of the room with Jackson, looking confused as he signed some papers while Jackson pointed to specific lines. In the next photo, taken moments later, according to the timestamp, Amanda was standing beside them, seemingly distracting a cousin who had approached the table. I zoomed in as much as the resolution allowed. The papers weren't clear enough to read, but my father's expression was unmistakable. Confusion mixed with trust. He was signing something he didn't fully understand, relying on Jackson's guidance. I immediately called Jessica and emailed her the photos. "This is interesting," she said after examining them. "It suggests Jackson may have been having your father sign documents even before the formal partnership agreement with you. Have you learned anything else?" "Actually, yes. I've been looking into Jackson's new business venture. He recently launched a company called Next Gen Solutions that offers almost identical services to Local Logic. Their first clients? The same ones who canceled contracts with me. That can't be coincidental, Jessica agreed. He's essentially stolen your business model and client list, but we need more concrete evidence linking him to the fraud in your name and your parents' sudden behavior change. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected text from Sam, a childhood friend who worked at Westbrook Community Bank, where my parents had held accounts for decades. Need to talk to you privately. Not at the bank. Meet at Riverside Park at 6. Sam had always been straight-laced and rule-following, so the cloak and dagger approach seemed out of character. Intrigued and hopeful, I arrived at the park early, choosing a bench with a clear view of the surroundings. Sam arrived looking nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. I could lose my job for this, he said without preamble. But something's not right with your parents' accounts, and you should know about it. What kind of something? He lowered his voice despite the empty park. Large transfers started about 2 months ago, right after your sister got engaged. At first, they were smaller amounts. Maybe 5,000 here, 8,000 there. But last week, there was a transfer of nearly $200,000 to an account I didn't recognize. 200,000? My parents don't have that kind of money. They didn't, Sam confirmed grimly. They took out a home equity line of credit against their house. The paperwork came through just days before the big transfer. Where did the money go? I can't access the receiving account details directly, but I did notice something weird. After each transfer, there were ATM withdrawals from machines near Jackson and Amanda's apartment complex. Not the full amounts, but 3,000 here, 5,000 there, just under the threshold that would trigger additional verification. This was the confirmation I needed that Jackson was indeed targeting my family's finances. But the scale was far larger than I'd imagined. He wasn't just after my business. He was draining my parents' retirement savings and home equity. There's more, Sam continued. Your father tried to stop a transfer last week. He came into the branch confused, saying he didn't remember authorizing it. But when the manager called the contact number on file to verify, someone who sounded like your father called back 20 minutes later and confirmed everything was fine. The original request to stop the transfer was dismissed as a misunderstanding. My blood ran cold. Someone impersonated my father on the phone? Sam nodded. I was in the office when the call came in. It sounded like him, but different. More confident, maybe. Not the way your dad usually talks. This explained so much. My father's strange behavior, the contradictory actions, the sudden withdrawal from my business account. He might not be fully aware of what was happening. I thanked Sam profusely for taking the risk to share this information. As he left, he added one final piece of advice. Quentin, whatever's going on, be careful. This feels bigger than just family drama. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Margaret, my mother's best friend for over 30 years, reached out through Jessica, requesting to meet privately. We arranged to meet at a diner in the next town over, where we were unlikely to be recognized. Margaret arrived wearing sunglasses and a scarf despite the mild weather, clearly concerned about being seen. I shouldn't be here, she said immediately. Diana would be furious if she knew I was talking to you, but something isn't right, and I can't just stand by anymore. She reached into her purse and withdrew a manila envelope. I found these while I was visiting your parents last week. I went to use the bathroom and got turned around, ending up in your father's home office instead. These papers were on his desk, and something about them caught my eye. Inside the envelope were copies of legal documents, power of attorney forms, updated wills, transfer of property deeds, all signed by my parents within the last month. The power of attorney granted financial decision-making authority to Amanda in case of my parents' incapacity. The new wills removed me entirely as a beneficiary. The property transfers prepared their house for sale, with proceeds to be managed by Amanda. Most disturbing of all, the signatures on these documents looked subtly different from my parents' normal handwriting, close enough to pass a casual inspection, but noticeably off to anyone familiar with their signatures. These don't look like their real signatures, I said, showing Margaret. She nodded. That's what caught my eye. I've received birthday cards from Diana for 30 years. That's not how she signs her name. Did you notice anything else unusual about my parents recently? Any changes in behavior? Margaret's expression turned pained. They're not themselves, Quentin. Diana used to call me every other day. Now weeks go by, and when I do see her, she seems foggy, forgetful. Frank too. I asked if they were feeling okay, and Amanda jumped in, saying they've both been having senior moments, and she's taking care of their affairs now. They're in their early 60s, I protested. They've never had cognitive issues before. I know. That's why I'm here. Something's wrong, and I'm worried about them. After Margaret left, I immediately took the copied documents to Jessica, who examined them with growing alarm. These are sophisticated forgeries, she confirmed. Good enough to fool most people, but they wouldn't stand up to forensic examination. And the power of attorney document is particularly concerning. It's setting up a situation where Amanda could legally take control of their finances if they're declared incapacitated, which would explain why someone might want my parents to appear confused and forgetful, I realized. It's not just about stealing their money, it's about legitimizing control over all their assets. Jessica nodded grimly. Exactly. And your removal from their will eliminates the person most likely to challenge that control. For the first time, I felt genuine fear, not just for myself, but for my parents. They weren't villains in this story, they were victims, possibly being manipulated or even drugged to facilitate a complex financial fraud. We need to move quickly, Jessica advised. At the rate their accounts are being drained, your parents could lose everything within weeks. And if they're being influenced cognitively, their health could be at risk too. As I left Jessica's office, I finally understood the full scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just about clearing my name or recovering my business. It was about rescuing my parents from a predator who had managed to turn their own daughter against their son, and was now systematically stripping them of their assets, autonomy, and possibly their health. The question was, how could I help people who currently believed I was their enemy? And how could I prove Jackson's involvement when he had so carefully covered his tracks? The answers would require more evidence and a carefully executed plan. With Jessica's guidance, I began methodically documenting everything that had happened since Amanda met Jackson. We created a detailed timeline tracking the evolution of events. When Amanda first mentioned Jackson, when they got engaged, when my parents' behavior began to change, when the financial transfers started, and when the campaign against me began. Patterns matter in cases like this, Jessica explained. Judges and prosecutors look for clear timelines that show cause and effect. Right now, we have circumstantial evidence, but we need something more concrete to prove Jackson's involvement. Jessica hired a forensic accountant named Derek to analyze the financial aspects of the case. After reviewing the bank records Sam had provided, along with my own financial information and the fraudulent loan applications, Derek identified a troubling pattern. The money isn't just being withdrawn, he reported during our meeting. It's being moved through a series of shell companies before ending up in offshore accounts. The primary recipient is a corporation called Turner Enterprises, established 3 months ago under the name William Turner. Jackson's last name is Turner, I noted. Any relation? Derek nodded. William Turner was Jackson's uncle who died last year. Jackson appears to be using his deceased uncle's identity to create companies that can't be directly linked to him. It's sophisticated money laundering. This was significant progress, but we still needed more direct evidence linking Jackson to the fraudulent activities. The breakthrough came from an unexpected ally, Harold Norton, my parents' next-door neighbor and a retired detective. I had always liked Harold, who had lived beside my parents for over 15 years. When I was in high school, he'd sometimes share stories from his police days that had fascinated me. On a hunch, I decided to reach out to him, hoping his investigative background might make him more skeptical of the stories circulating about me. I called Harold from Drew's phone, knowing he might not answer if he saw my number. When he picked up, I quickly identified myself and asked if we could meet. "I've been hearing some concerning things about you, Quentin," he said cautiously. "None of it is true, Mr. Norton. I'm being set up, and I think my parents might be in danger. Please, just meet with me for 10 minutes. If you still think I'm lying, I'll leave you alone." After a moment's hesitation, he agreed to meet me at a coffee shop across town. Harold arrived punctually, his expression guarded but not hostile. I laid out everything we'd discovered so far, showing him the photos from the engagement party, the forged documents Margaret had found, and the financial analysis from Derek. As a former detective, Harold quickly grasped the significance of these pieces. "I've noticed some unusual activities myself," he admitted. "Your sister and her fiancé visit your parents' house at odd hours, sometimes as late as midnight. Your parents, who used to be quite social, barely leave the house anymore. And last week, several men in business attire spent over an hour examining the exterior of your parents' property, measuring and taking photos as if they were appraising it. They're preparing to sell the house," I realized, connecting this to the property transfer documents Margaret had found. Harold nodded thoughtfully. "I've also noticed your parents seem different. Your father used to stop and chat whenever he was working in the yard. Now he barely makes eye contact. Your mother hasn't tended her garden in weeks, which is completely out of character for her. Do you believe me?" I asked directly. Harold studied me for a long moment. "I've known you since you were 14, Quentin. You were always a straight shooter, even as a teenager. The story about you threatening your parents never sat right with me. Yes, I believe someone is manipulating this situation, and your parents might be victims rather than willing participants." His validation nearly brought tears to my eyes. After weeks of being doubted and villainized, having someone from my parents' community believe me felt like a crucial turning point. "Will you help us gather evidence?" I asked. "I'm retired," Harold reminded me, "but I still have friends on the force, and I have security cameras on my property that happen to have a view of your parents' front entrance. I can't aim them directly at their house, that would be invasion of privacy, but my driveway camera captures their front door in the background." This was exactly the break we needed. Harold agreed to review his security footage from the past month and note any unusual visitors or activities. He also offered to keep a closer eye on my parents moving forward, noting visitors and their comings and goings. 2 days later, Harold called with significant news. "I've been reviewing the footage, and there's definitely something strange happening. Almost every night around 11, your sister and Jackson arrive. Sometimes they bring others with them, people I don't recognize. They usually stay for about an hour, then leave. Your parents never come outside during these visits. Can you identify any of the visitors?" I asked eagerly. One man caught my attention. He's visited 3 times now, always arriving separately from Amanda and Jackson. I recognized him as Tony Mercer. "Who's that?" He was known to the department years ago for document forgery, specialized in signatures and official paperwork. Never could pin enough on him for serious time, but he was definitely in that business. A document forger. This explained the sophisticated forgeries on my parents' financial paperwork. Jessica was particularly interested in this development. "If we can prove this Mercer person visited your parents' house multiple times in the company of Jackson and Amanda, and we can establish his history as a forger, that's powerful circumstantial evidence, supporting our theory of fraud." Our case was building, but I still had no direct evidence of what Jackson might be doing to influence my parents' mental state. Margaret's observation about their foggy behavior troubled me deeply. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place unexpectedly when Bethany, Amanda's maid of honor and college roommate, contacted me through Jessica's office. "I need to talk to you about Amanda and Jackson," she said, sounding nervous. "Something's not right, and I'm worried about what they're doing." We arranged to meet the following day at Jessica's office, where Bethany revealed why she had reached out. "Amanda's changed since she met Jackson," she began. "She used to be thoughtful and kind, but now she's secretive and defensive. Last week, I overheard her and Jackson talking when they thought I'd left her apartment. They were discussing your parents, saying they've almost got the whole house and retirement accounts, and laughing about how Quentin never saw it coming." My stomach tightened at this confirmation of their deliberate targeting. "I was so disturbed that I started paying more attention," Bethany continued. "Yesterday I pretended to use the bathroom but actually searched their guest room while they were making dinner. I found these." She pulled out her phone and showed us photos she'd taken of prescription bottles. "These were hidden in Jackson's toiletry bag. The labels are for your father, but they're medications I recognize because my grandmother takes them for her early dementia. Except these are much higher doses than what would normally be prescribed." Jessica examined the photos carefully. "These are legitimate medications, but at these doses, they could certainly cause confusion and memory issues in someone without dementia. Combined with certain other medications or alcohol, they could make someone extremely suggestible. There's more, Bethany said, her voice shaking slightly. I recorded a conversation between them yesterday. I know that might not be legal, but I was so concerned. She played the recording for us. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but the content was unmistakable. Jackson's voice. Once we get the house on the market, we're home free. The old man's so confused now he'd sign anything I put in front of him. Amanda. What about Quentin? He's still causing problems. Jackson. He's finished. No money, no credibility, no family support. Even if he figures it out, who's going to believe him now? We've made sure everyone thinks he's unstable and dangerous. Amanda. I still feel bad about how far we went with that. He is my brother. Jackson. Don't get soft now. Remember your cut is 30%. That's over $200,000 once we sell the house. Do you want that or not? Amanda. I want it. I just wish we didn't have to destroy him completely. Jackson. It's business, babe. Besides, he was always your parents' favorite. Now you get everything, and he gets nothing. Seems fair to me. The recording continued, with Jackson explicitly mentioning plans to have my parents declared mentally incompetent after selling their house, allowing Amanda to control the proceeds through the power of attorney. By the time the recording ended, I was shaking with a mixture of rage and vindication. My sister was a willing participant in this scheme, motivated by jealousy and greed. My parents were being drugged and manipulated into compliance, and Jackson had orchestrated the entire operation, from isolating me to forging documents to eventually taking control of my parents' entire estate. This is exactly what we needed, Jessica said, her expression determined. We have enough now to request an emergency hearing with the judge overseeing your parents' protection order against you. With this evidence, we can argue that they're victims of undue influence and possible elder abuse. She turned to Bethany. Would you be willing to testify about what you've seen and heard? Bethany nodded firmly. Amanda was my friend for years, but what they're doing is wrong. I'll testify. As we prepared our case for the hearing, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief at finally having concrete evidence. Anger at the calculated way Jackson and Amanda had targeted my family, and deep worry about my parents' physical and mental health after months of apparent drugging. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. In the meantime, Jessica worked tirelessly to prepare our presentation of evidence, while I tried to process the betrayal by my own sister. The sister I had grown up with, shared secrets with, protected from bullies. She had willingly participated in destroying my life out of jealousy and greed. Despite everything, I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to stop the ongoing fraud, recover what could be recovered, and most importantly, rescue my parents from the dangerous situation they were in. As the hearing approached, I focused on that goal, pushing aside my personal hurt to concentrate on the legal strategy that might save my family from further harm. The morning of the hearing arrived with a sense of weighted significance. For nearly a month I had been systematically isolated, financially ruined, and publicly vilified. Today would determine whether I could begin reclaiming my life and, more importantly, help my parents escape the manipulation they'd been subjected to. Jessica and I arrived at the courthouse early to review our strategy one final time. We had organized our evidence chronologically, starting with the suspicious timing of events following Amanda's engagement and building toward the damning recordings and testimony from Bethany. Remember, Jessica advised, stay calm no matter what happens. The judge needs to see you as rational and concerned, not angry or vengeful, regardless of what Amanda or Jackson might claim. As we entered the courtroom, I was shocked to see Amanda had brought my parents with her. My mother looked thin and tired, her normally perfect hair disheveled. My father seemed disoriented, glancing around the courtroom with confusion evident in his eyes. They were seated beside Amanda and Jackson, with a distinguished older attorney I recognized as William Stevens from the firm that had contacted me initially. My mother noticed me and quickly looked away, leaning to whisper something to Amanda. My father stared at me for several seconds before recognition seemed to dawn, followed by a flash of what looked like fear. Whatever they had been told about me, it had clearly left them terrified of their own son. The judge, an older woman named Judge Eleanor Harmon, called the court to order and establish the purpose of the hearing, to review the protection order filed by my parents and address my counterclaim of fraud and elder abuse. Stevens presented his case first, painting me as a troubled, financially desperate son who had coerced my father into investing in a failing business, then threatened the family when they refused further support. He submitted affidavits from family members recounting stories of my supposed instability and aggression, stories I knew had been carefully planted by Amanda and Jackson. When my mother was called to testify, her account was halting and confused. She claimed I had come to their house yelling and making threats, but couldn't provide specific details about what I had allegedly said or done. When asked about the text message sent from her phone, she seemed genuinely confused. "I don't remember sending any text," she said, looking to Amanda for guidance. "I've been having trouble with my memory lately." Throughout their testimony, I maintained my composure, though it was heartbreaking to see my parents so clearly diminished from the vibrant, sharp people they had been just months earlier. When it was our turn, Jessica methodically presented our evidence. She established the timeline of events, showed the financial analysis of the suspicious transfers, and presented Harold's security footage, showing the late-night visits, including those by the known document forger. The courtroom grew increasingly tense as our case unfolded. Jackson's expression hardened, while Amanda began whispering urgently to their attorney. My parents appeared increasingly confused, with my father particularly seeming to struggle to follow the proceedings. The most powerful moment came when Bethany took the stand. She testified about the conversations she had overheard and the prescription medications she had discovered in Jackson's possession. When Jessica played the recording of Jackson and Amanda discussing their plans, a visible ripple of shock went through the courtroom. "This is absurd," Jackson interrupted, standing up. "That recording is obviously fake. Anyone could have created that." "Mr. Turner, you will have your opportunity to respond," Judge Harmon warned. "Please sit down." Jessica then presented the analysis from a pharmaceutical expert who had reviewed the medication information provided by Bethany. The expert confirmed that the prescription dosages were significantly higher than would typically be prescribed for someone my father's age and without a formal diagnosis of cognitive impairment. These dosages, the expert testimony read, would likely cause confusion, memory lapses, and increased suggestibility, particularly when administered regularly over time. When Jackson took the stand to rebut our claims, his carefully cultivated charm gave way to defensive aggression. "This is a desperate attempt by a failing businessman to blame others for his problems," he insisted. "Frank and Diane came to us concerned about Quentin's behavior and financial demands. We've simply been protecting them." Jessica's cross-examination was masterful. "Mr. Turner, can you explain why you were in possession of prescription medications intended for Frank Lawson?" "I occasionally pick up prescriptions for them as a favor," Jackson replied smoothly. "And can you explain why those prescriptions were hidden in your toiletry bag rather than given to Mr. Lawson?" "I hadn't had a chance to deliver them yet." "Interesting," Jessica continued. "Because according to the pharmacy records we've subpoenaed, those particular prescriptions were never authorized by Dr. Prescriptions Martin, who has been the Lawsons' physician for 15 years. They were prescribed by Dr. Harold Wilson, who has no prior relationship with the Lawsons and who, coincidentally, shares an address with your cousin." Jackson's composure cracked visibly. "You're twisting facts to create a narrative that doesn't exist. The Lawsons have been entirely lucid and made their own decisions about their finances and family relationships. Then perhaps you can explain," Jessica continued relentlessly, "why nearly $200,000 was transferred from their accounts to shell corporations that trace back to a company established under your deceased uncle's name. That was the fatal slip." Jessica had never mentioned the specific amount or the connection to his deceased uncle during the proceedings. Jackson realized his mistake immediately. "I never said anything about $200,000, he backpedaled. "You're trying to confuse me." "Indeed, I never mentioned that sum," Jessica agreed. "Yet you seem remarkably familiar with the exact amount that was fraudulently transferred." Jackson's face flushed with anger. Before he could respond, he made a critical error in judgment. Turning toward me, he hissed, "You think you're so clever. You have no idea what your parents really think of you. They were happy to cut you out. I just helped them do what they already wanted to do." The outburst caused Judge Harmon to bang her gavel sharply. "Mr. Turner, that's enough. Your hostile behavior is inappropriate in this courtroom." As Jackson was escorted back to his seat, I noticed my father watching him with a new expression, one of dawning comprehension, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally coming together in his mind. Judge Harmon called a brief recess to review the evidence before making her ruling. During this break, I noticed my father asking to use the restroom. As he passed near me in the corridor, I seized the opportunity for a moment alone with him. "Dad," I said softly, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you remember signing documents about investing in my company? Do you remember withdrawing the money 3 days later?" He looked at me with confusion, then surprising clarity. "I remember signing papers," he said slowly, "but I've been feeling so foggy lately. Ever since I started taking those new vitamins Amanda and Jackson brought over. Said they would help my memory. But everything's been harder to remember since then." "Vitamins?" I asked gently. "Little white pills," he confirmed, "twice a day with meals. Jackson says they're expensive supplements from Europe." Before we could continue, Amanda appeared, quickly taking our father's arm. "The judge is coming back," she said, glaring at me. "Stop trying to manipulate him." As we returned to the courtroom, my mother caught my eye briefly. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a flicker of the woman I knew, intelligent, perceptive, and fiercely protective. She glanced at Amanda, then back at me, a question forming in her expression. Judge Harmon returned and addressed the court with grave seriousness. "Having reviewed the evidence presented today, I find sufficient cause for immediate action. The protection order against Quentin Lawson is hereby dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering a full medical evaluation of Frank and Diane Lawson by independent physicians selected by the court." She turned her attention to Jackson. "Mr. Turner, the evidence presented raises serious concerns about potential elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and illegal administration of prescription medication. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." Finally, she addressed Amanda directly. "Miss Lawson, your participation in these activities is deeply troubling. Pending the investigation, I am freezing all financial accounts connected to you and Mr. Turner, and revoking the power of attorney documents presented as evidence today." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the judge finished speaking. Jackson leaned over to whisper urgently to their attorney, while Amanda sat in stunned silence. But the most significant reaction came from my parents. My father reached for my mother's hand, squeezing it as they exchanged a look of dawning realization. As we left the courtroom, a court officer approached with news that my mother had requested to speak with me privately, under supervision given the circumstances. In a small conference room, with a court officer present at a discreet distance, I finally came face to face with my mother. "That text message," she said immediately, her voice quavering. "I never sent it. Amanda took my phone to update it that day. She must have sent it pretending to be me." The simple admission broke something inside me, the tight control I had maintained throughout this ordeal. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "We would never lock you out, Quentin," she continued, her own eyes wet. "Something's been happening to us, to your father especially. He's not himself. Neither of us has been." "I know, Mom," I said gently. "The medications they've been giving you, they weren't vitamins or supplements. They were prescription drugs to make you confused and easy to manipulate." Horror dawned on her face. "All those papers we signed, the bank transfers. Amanda said we were helping set up trust funds, planning for retirement. We trusted her." The court officer indicated our time was nearly up. Before leaving, my mother grasped my hand tightly. "I'm so sorry, Quentin. I don't know what's real anymore, but I know my son wouldn't hurt us. Help us figure out what they've done." That brief conversation marked the first step toward healing what had been so methodically broken. As medical evaluations were scheduled and financial forensics began in earnest, I realized we were finally turning the corner toward truth and, hopefully, justice. The weeks following the courtroom revelation were chaotic but purposeful. My parents were admitted to Westbrook Medical Center for comprehensive evaluations, where toxicology tests confirmed significant levels of sedatives and anti-anxiety medications in their systems. none of which had been legitimately prescribed by their regular physician. As the drugs gradually cleared from their systems, their cognitive functions improved dramatically. My father's memory returned almost completely, though he struggled with gaps from the periods when he had been most heavily medicated. My mother recovered more quickly, her natural resilience asserting itself as soon as the chemical influences were removed. The district attorney's office moved swiftly, filing multiple felony charges against Jackson: elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, forgery, and unlawful administration of prescription medications. Amanda faced similar charges, though somewhat reduced due to evidence suggesting Jackson had been the mastermind and had exerted significant influence over her as well. During the investigation, authorities discovered this wasn't Jackson's first such scheme. Under various names, he had targeted affluent families in 3 other states, ingratiated himself with a family member, and systematically exploited family dynamics to gain control of assets. He had refined his approach each time, becoming more sophisticated in his methods. My family had been his most ambitious target yet. Through careful financial forensics, we determined that approximately $340,000 had been stolen from my parents through various means: the $50,000 from my business account, loans taken out in their names, equity extracted from their home, and retirement accounts that had been liquidated. While the full recovery of these funds would take time, the freezing of Jackson and Amanda's assets prevented them from spending or hiding most of the money. Jessica proved invaluable throughout this process, coordinating with prosecutors, financial investigators, and healthcare providers to ensure every aspect of the case was properly addressed. Her dedication went far beyond what our modest retainer could have covered, something I promised myself I would properly thank her for once my financial situation stabilized. The most painful aspect of the aftermath was dealing with Amanda's role in the scheme. Initial psychological evaluations suggested she displayed traits of vulnerability to manipulation, combined with long-standing resentment toward what she perceived as my favored status in the family. Jackson had expertly exploited these vulnerabilities, gradually drawing her into his plot with promises of wealth and validation. This didn't excuse her actions, but it helped my parents process their daughter's betrayal. "We did favor you in some ways," my mother admitted during one of our family therapy sessions, which had become a weekly commitment, not with love, but with attention and pride. "We celebrated your achievements more visibly than Amanda's. We never realized how deeply that affected her." "I should have seen it too," I acknowledged. "All those years I thought we were close, but there was this undercurrent I completely missed." My father, still dealing with occasional confusion from the lingering effects of the medications, spoke less during these sessions but listened intently. "Family shouldn't be a competition," he said during one particularly emotional meeting. "Somehow we created that dynamic without meaning to. It doesn't justify what happened, but we all have healing to do." 4 months after the hearing, both Jackson and Amanda accepted plea deals rather than face trials. Jackson's was considerably harsher, including significant jail time and restitution requirements. Amanda received a suspended sentence contingent on mandatory therapy, community service, and her cooperation in the case against Jackson. The plea deals included provisions preventing either of them from controlling or managing the financial affairs of others in the future. Rebuilding my own life proceeded in parallel with my parents' recovery. With Jackson's scheme exposed, many clients reached out to apologize for their abrupt departures and express interest in resuming business. Taylor had kept minimal operations running during the crisis, which gave us a foundation to rebuild upon. Most touchingly, my father asked to become genuinely involved in the business this time. "Not just as an investor," he clarified, "but as a contributor. I spent 30 years in marketing before retiring. Maybe those skills could help you rebuild." His offer was exactly what both the business and our relationship needed. Working together gave us structured time to reconnect, with the shared goal of rebuilding what had been damaged. His experience complemented my technical skills perfectly, and within 6 months, Local Logic Solutions had regained most of its former clients and added several new ones. The financial recovery was slower, but steady. Insurance covered some of the fraudulent loans taken out in my name, while asset recovery from Jackson's frozen accounts gradually restored portions of my parents' retirement savings. The damage to their home equity would take longer to address, but with the business growing, I was able to help supplement their income in the meantime. 1 year after the nightmare began, we had established a new normal that, in some ways, was stronger than what had existed before. My parents sold their house not under duress this time, but as a positive choice to downsize to a comfortable condo that required less maintenance. I purchased a modest 3-bedroom home closer to the business office, with a dedicated guest room for my parents' frequent visits. My relationship with Amanda remained complicated and carefully boundaried. After completing 6 months of intensive therapy, she had begun to recognize the depth of her actions and the psychological vulnerabilities that had made her susceptible to Jackson's manipulation. Our parents established limited contact with her through their family counselor, a process that would likely take years to fully navigate. I chose a different path, maintaining distance while not seeking retribution. "I don't hate you," I told her during our one direct conversation after her sentencing. "But trust is earned, not granted, and rebuilding it after something like this may not be possible in our lifetime." She had nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand. I wouldn't trust me either." On the anniversary of the text message that had started it all, my parents and I held a small celebration dinner at my new house. The business was thriving, with Dad enjoying his role as marketing director and mentor to our growing team. Mom had discovered a passion for volunteer work with a senior advocacy group, using our family's experience to help identify and prevent elder financial abuse in the community. During dinner, Mom disappeared into the guest room briefly, returning with a small wrapped box. We wanted to mark today, but not as a sad anniversary, more as a new beginning. Inside the box was a key on a simple silver keychain, engraved with the words, "Always welcome." It was a key to their new condo. "We know you have your own place now," Dad explained, "but we wanted you to know that wherever we are is still your home too. No locks will ever be changed on you again." The simple gesture represented everything we had fought to reclaim: trust, security, and the unbreakable bonds of family that had weathered the worst kind of betrayal. As we sat together that evening, I reflected on the painful journey we had endured. The experience had taught me that family relationships require constant attention and honest communication. It showed me that perceived favoritism and unaddressed resentments can fester into dangerous vulnerabilities. Most importantly, it reinforced that protecting those we love sometimes means having the courage to fight for truth, even when the entire world seems aligned against you. The road ahead would still have challenges. My parents continued to have moments of confusion or anxiety, echoes of their traumatic experience. My business, though recovering well, still faced the hurdles any small company must overcome, and the complex emotions surrounding Amanda's betrayal would require ongoing processing for all of us. But sitting there with my parents, watching them laugh together in a way I had feared I might never see again, I knew that what we had rebuilt was stronger than what had been broken. The foundation of our family now rested on honest communication, clear boundaries, and a hard-won understanding of both our individual vulnerabilities and our collective strength. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to discover what truly matters. And sometimes, the family you fight hardest to save becomes the family you truly deserve. Have you ever had to stand up for the truth when everyone doubted you? Or have you experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something stronger being built in its place? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might find strength in knowing that even the darkest situations can lead to healing and growth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you the courage to fight for your truth, no matter how difficult the path may seem.